Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to day 2 of the Summit for Family Support and Navigation, where compassion, empowerment, and community connect. I am Christy Myers, and I will get us started today. I think most of you were able to join us last week on day 1, but we do have some additional attendees that were not able to make it. So welcome to all. And we will make sure to provide access to the information provided on day 1 to those of you who were not available. The invite you received yesterday had several attachments for your review to include our day 2 agenda, guided questions that you can be contemplating for the afternoon breakout sessions, as well as the presentation by Pat Noby on day 1, in which we experienced some technical difficulties. So please take time to review that great presentation from Pat. I would like to start by expressing my sincere thanks to the many people who have worked to support this year's summit, starting with our all amazing Karen Lucan. I suspect most everyone here knows Karen well based on her career-focused goals in supporting people with disabilities. As you know, she has worked tirelessly to reach out and connect like-minded people, build partnerships to support advocacy and sustainable outcomes, as well as working with the system to enhance whole person integrated care. We would not be here today if it weren't for her dedication, perseverance, and wisdom. So thank you, Karen, so much. I also want to highlight David Laxton, Director of Communications with the Autism Society of North Carolina, for his technical experience, expertise, and support throughout the development of this year's summit. We could not have made this happen in the virtual world without David, so thank you, David. I also want to make a shout out to our session moderators and group discussion facilitators for their support of the summit and continued work across the state to support families. As you know, our speakers and panelists have put forth much effort to share their current work and experiences in family support and navigation, ensuring we are all informed and working together on a unified front. So a big thank you out to our speakers and panelists. Next, I want to express our gratitude to our family members and self-advocates for being a part of this group. It's important that you know your input, experiences, and feedback are essential to our work and mission objectives. And lastly, I want to thank all of our attendees for joining, taking in all the shared information, spreading this work with your colleagues, your friends, and families, as well as providing the necessary feedback to help guide our next steps. So next up, I would like to share a few discussion highlights from our breakout sessions on day 1. Unfortunately, we didn't get to have our full allotted time, but certainly lots of great thoughts, feedback, and ideas were generated for us to start planning our short and long-term action steps. So under our thoughts and ideas, one of the most common things mentioned was the importance of having people living with disabilities and their families at the forefront of all groups and discussions with providers, the state, and community when designing systems and approaches to innovative solutions that meet their needs. We were reminded of the flexibility needed to meet varied communities and regions with a call to include family navigation care management model. One of our groups requested family navigation resources to support people and families outside of the publicly funded service system and instituting a more systematic approach to helping families and people with disabilities understand and navigate the complexity of Medicaid transformation. We were asked to recognize and respect the trauma that many families have experienced and or continue to experience, and understand that strengthening families equals strengthening the system. To improve outcomes and contain cost, family members need to be part of the equation. One of our family members noted that placing a higher priority on interventions for children with disabilities would support better outcomes when transitioning to adulthood. And it's also important to recognize that family navigation helps families avoid crises and more costly services by increasing education and resources. One of our participants recommended expanding the opportunity for people with disabilities and families, opportunities to talk with state officials, similar to the current COVID safety group weekly calls. Some of our short-term action steps that were mentioned, many groups requested work to support our LME MCO efforts to adopt the new in-lieu service definition for family navigation. There was also a call to expand our Family Support Echo project, finding ways to gather data from providers on how utilization of family support lightens their load. Of course, educating the legislature on family navigation billable services and advocating for the system. Exploring ways to measure outcomes, not just at the individual family level, but families across practices and systems. And one call for exploring the potential of bringing the Olmstead Committee to help support data needs. So lots of things for us to explore and consider moving forward. We also had some long-term action steps that were recommended. Those focused additional focus on education for teachers, doctors, nurses regarding the innovations waiver services and supports, since this is a primary vehicle for families to receive information. One of our requests was providing a peer support system in care management for people with families of intellectual and developmental disabilities, improving the quality of supports and information provided, and improving understanding of system and navigation of services needed and available. There was also a recommendation made to embed family navigators in pediatric offices, schools, LME MCOs as part of an integrated care practice and setting. And then lastly, there was a call to look at job descriptions all over to embrace the value that family members with lived experience can provide. Now, this certainly does not cover all of the great discussion that occurred during our last meeting, but it does highlight the themes throughout. So a lot to consider as we move through the afternoon. Before we move to our first panel, I wanted to go over a few technical items. We will remain in this webinar format for all presentations, and then we will move to Zoom meeting for a small group breakout later in the day discussion, just as we did last week. And we will ask that you use the Q&A function for thoughts and or questions that you want to share with the group. Now, time for Q&A is limited, so please know that questions we do not get to based on allotted time will be collected and follow-up delivered to all participants. We ask panelists to turn on their cameras and unmute during their designated presentation, then mute and turn off their cameras after their presentation. All sessions will be recorded and made available at a later time for viewing outside, of course, of our small group discussions. Those will not be recorded. We will also have closed caption on throughout the webinar portion of the event. When we switch to the Zoom meeting toward the end of the day, the meeting link will be placed in the Q&A, and you also have it on the invite that I sent out yesterday. I will send another invite via email just for convenience prior to transition in case you have any issues with that transition. So once you are in the Zoom meeting, David will close out the webinar, open the meeting, and trigger your pre-assigned breakout rooms. We do have 11 breakout rooms, and each room has an assigned facilitator for discussion and documentation of feedback. Please know that this transition takes a few minutes, so hang tight and we will get you to your assigned rooms. After that small group discussion, everybody will return to our large room meeting for a brief summary of discussions and wrap up for the day. And lastly, please have patience and grace as we move through the day. As you know, our virtual world is not always perfect. One more thing before we move on to our panel that I'd like to mention is that we will be moving all the summit information from the Eventbrite page to the IDD Medical Health Home Initiative site to include our agenda, our speaker bios, our presentations, Q&A, discussion feedback, and action steps. It will take us some time to organize and move that, so expect an email in the next 2 to 3 weeks or so that will provide you a link to that site for review of all this information. Also, please forward any additional thoughts, questions, or feedback after the summit to Karen or myself, because we don't want to miss out on any of your creative ideas. So it is time to sit back, relax, and I will turn things over to Melinda Plew with the ARC of North Carolina. Thank you.